Hello, everybody. I am here with the brothers Dillcox, which I just can't get out of my head for some reason. It's Greg and Joe, but the brothers Dillcox just has a nice ring to it in my head. So I'm sorry if you hate it. I just love it at the moment.
No, we used to go by Dilly Brothers quite a bit, so
I dig it.
I've been called worse today, so
Actually, my daughter's called me worse. So we are here for our first session of Battle of the Ballads, and this was conceived late night a few weeks ago between Greg and I, just talking about things to do because that's something to do. And we've been hashing out this concept of going through the decades from the year of birth for the oldest one of us, being me, 1984, and going through the present and figuring out the best song of that year and the best song of the decade. And it's during March Madness, so why not? And I'm actually really looking forward to this journey through musical history. And it makes me wish I still had cassette tapes and folders of CDs by starting back in 1984. So, Joe, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on 1984 and what you ended up with as your best or favorite song for that year.
okay, so that actually brings up a good question. Can we, before we start getting into these, can we discuss a little bit of what everyone's criteria was? Because I think everyone's going to have a slightly different take on what best means, especially when it comes to music. And I think I did different criteria just among the first 2 years. So I'd be kind of interested in where that happened first. Like, what is the criteria?
I just took my favorite. I ruled everything out and took my favorite. And in doing so, because I've done all the 80s now, I have some very obscure ones that I don't think a lot of people know, but I think that'll also be interesting to talk about, when we talk about the best songs. So how could the best song of the year be one that nobody ever heard? But that could be the case, in a lot of cases.
Sure.
There's certain songs that we released in the 70s that we don't hear until it's on a movie soundtrack in the 2000s. So that was my approach. Just what's my favorite from that year and that decade.
not being a musician, obviously, I know what appeals to me. So I can't be like, damn, this speed metal song, those licks are tight. And I would never be that guy anyway because I can't do speed metal. But I looked at the top singles for every year. And then I went through and looked at every album I could see listed for each year. And for an artist that struck me, I had to see what it was on that album, because oftentimes the best song released in a year wasn't the single. I mean, if you look at 1984 in general, which Rolling Stone did a huge piece about it being the greatest year in pop music, Thriller charted, and it was from 1982. And then you had I Think We're Alone Now charting from 83. So I was like, I can't just go on the singles because there are a lot of them that don't chart for 2 or 3 years, or like Dan said, in a soundtrack a decade later. But I looked at cultural significance, personal significance, and has it stood the test of time? The test of time will become trickier as we get closer to modern day, but 84 was a tough year.
So, Greg, did you read my notes? Because I'm looking at mine and I literally have 1984, the best year of music of my lifetime. And then 1985, didn't realize the song was released this year as opposed to the year when it charted. So this
I ran into that same problem quite a few times as well, because I think I pulled a song for 85 in my list of short ones that was a Cyndi Lauper one, but was actually released in 83, but just didn't chart until 85. So
Yep.
Yeah, I ran into that too. I left it on my list anyway because it's my favorite Cyndi Lauper song and it charted in 85. So
I mean, I was shocked in going through these that the Gin Blossoms actually had tracks released in 89 that didn't come out till 93 when they were on a label, so it's just fine. I did a lot of research on this and like, oh, that could have almost won, but sounds like we're all kind of coming at it from very different places, which makes it even more fun for the deliberation. We get to the best of the decade. So, Joe, what do you got for us for 1984?
So my top song from 1984 is actually When Doves Cry, Prince. And for a couple of reasons, right? Because I took a little bit of everything. I took kind of my favorites, so kind of personal impact. I took cultural impact, staying power, and also I factored in, popularity, right? Because how can it be the best song if everybody hates it except me, right? And so when I used all those criteria, it was When Doves Cry, and I don't even think it was that close for me when I went through 84. I love the song. I still jam to it today. It was his first #1 hit, even before some of the other, I don't know, more popular ones, I guess Purple Rain.
Don't just steal my thunder, Joe.
I should probably stop here then, because I have a lot of notes on this song and the other Prince ones from that year. So
No, I want to
pass
hear.
it over
I'm
to you
curious.
then.
I'm curious.
So mostly it was just for that album. The only one that actually won a Grammy was Purple Rain. But the When Doves Cry sold better. It was more well received. It was his first #1. It ended the year, I think, at #1 as well. It's the highest on Rolling Stone's list of top 500 greatest songs of all time. It's his highest one at 52, I believe it was. It's been included in Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's most meaningful songs in history. So there's a lot of cultural impact that goes along with the fact that I can just like rock out to it right now and be so happy.
I'm kind of jonesing for it, to be honest. I could definitely go for listening to it right now. Very cool. I actually wasn't expecting to start there, and I love that we did. Greg, what'd you have, my friend?
Okay. 84 was so tough, as I told you guys, especially because the early conception is we were going to do 1 year, and then we moved to decade, and then we'll do 2 years per video. So this is my longest short list. It's roughly 30 songs. And I'm just going to read them quickly, skipping Joe's pick and what I believe is Dan's pick, just so we can get, for anyone who hasn't looked at the list of songs coming out in 84, I just want you guys to know how hard this was for the three of us. But Sunglasses at Night, Corey Hart, You Spin Me Round Like a Record, Dead or Alive, We're Not Gonna Take It, Twisted Sister, which might be the only hair metal song I'll list in my short list, but it's a great one. Uptown Girl, Billy Joel, Ghostbusters, Ray Park Jr., Like a Virgin, Madonna, Rebel Yell, Billy Idol, Eat It, one of our early Weird Al parody hits, Wake Me Up Before You Go Go by Wham, Cruel Summer, Bananarama, Let's Hear It for the Boys, Denise Williams, I Want to Break Free, and Radio Gaga by Queen. I mean, any Queen song could be in the list, but those two. Jungle Love by The Time, which I feel like had more cultural significance later. Karma Chameleon, Culture Club, Smooth Operator, Sade, 99 Luff Balloons, which once again, once it started getting covered, What's Love Got to Do with It? Tina Turner. I Just Called to Say I Love You, Stevie Wonder. I know that song gets knocked in High Fidelity, but Jack Black is wrong. Killing Moon, Echo and the Bunnyman, another one from a soundtrack later. Summer of 69, Bryan Adams. Shout, Tears for Fears. Relax and the Power of Love by Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Relax was a cultural phenomenon. One Love, Bob Marley, which is timeless. And then Aha's Take on Me, which I did have some trouble where to put it on my short list because 4 different sources I saw had it listed in different years, but the album came out in 84. So that's where I put it. So it was
my pick.
It was a crazy year, and the cultural significance of some of these songs and how prevalent they are. When we were starting 84, I'm like the year before I was born. And I mean, I was born in December of 85, so almost 2 full years. So I thought it was going to be hard because I wasn't going to have a song, but then, damn, I have too many songs. But ultimately, I went with Careless Whisper by Wham off this record right here.
Yes.
This is one of those that George Michael's cultural significance is understated, I think, because as a musician, his cultural significance is a lot on current British, but at the same time, like Mariah Carey famously only did carpool karaoke because George Michael did it. So that he is so relevant to these famous musicians, and then everything he went through, being outed and the charity work he did, George Michael is one of those underrated superstars because unfortunately he's more known for a Christmas song and then some tabloid things, which honestly, the only reason it was a tabloid scandal is because of his sexuality, and it shouldn't have been a story at all. And who doesn't love Careless Whisper? It's one of my go-to jukebox songs, and we've got the other one coming up in a couple years that'll be my song. But Careless Whisper, one of my all-time favorites, and I couldn't pick anything from 84, and I feel like you guys are going to split the difference on an artist, and I'm going to win.
So I actually when I went through and I made my initial hack at this, that was in my top 5, and one of my first cut decisions was I thought you would pick it, and I was like, well, I'm gonna argue a different one, so I chopped it immediately.
That was on my longer list, but didn't quite make my short list. But now that I'm hearing about it, I want to listen to it, if that makes sense. I'm actually kind of surprised with that one, but that's a nice pick. I had a difficult time with this simply because, well, no, I didn't have a difficult time at all, but acknowledging that some songs came out at times I didn't think they did, and having to say, no, you're not it, kind of was tough for me. 84, some of my favorite all-time songs came out. What's Love Got to Do with It? You got Tina Turner there. You got some Billy Ocean, Caribbean Queen, Radio Gaga, which, I mean, I love that song. It's my favorite Queen song. But my favorite song of all time happened to come out that year. And it's on my favorite album of all time, by my favorite musician of all time. And it has to be Purple Rain, which I'm pretty sure anybody who knows me knows. And it was not even a question for me. Like when we said, oh, we're starting at 84, I already had that song. Like, yeah, I'll look at what else came out that year. But
oh, I'm convinced you picked birth dates so you could have Purple Rain.
I mean, yeah, it had to be said. It's just, there's no other song for me during that time, but it's interesting. I was looking through my playlist, like, what am I missing? And everything that's like on the first 30 songs of my playlist was from 1984. And I'm like, huh. So though that's my favorite song, I would take the majority of the songs and singles that were out that year and take them over most of the stuff for years afterwards. So interesting start to the 80s here that we got 2 Princes and a Wham. And I like that start.
I'm actually not surprised at all.
Oh, wait, we said 2 Princes, so I think we got to give a shout out to the Spin Doctors for title of the song.
Yes.
There. 85, I think, is going to get interesting, and I'm curious if I have the same as somebody else. So
I think you and I are going to have the same.
I'm wondering. And it's not going to be, is it going to be as long as we got each other by BJ Thomas, the theme from The Growing Pains?
I mean, how could it not? Honestly, Joe might have the same as well. We might just not have a debate on this one.
Do we want to narrow down 84 before we move on to 85?
So I was thinking maybe at the end of all
Okay.
of it, we narrow down the decade. So we see who's presented.
Okay.
Because we all know 84 is going to be Prince, Purple Rain, because it just has to be. No, I'm kidding. But no, I think it's kind of hard to narrow that down with the choices there. The cultural relevance is there for all of them, but I think if we look at it for the decade, it might get a bit easier than for the year, because then we can kind of have our bloodbath for each year and see the progression of it and see who shows up more and stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm down.
Sometimes the vodka gets flowing, so I just got to make sure. So Joe, what'd you have for 85?
85. This one I went almost entirely cultural significance / cultural impact. And it's We Are the World, USA for Africa. And that's Taco wanting to get in right now. It's written MJ and Lionel Richie. It's actually the 8th highest selling of all time for a physical single. There have been some digital singles that have outsold that by miles because it's much easier now. But as far as physical singles, but some of the other ones I don't want to go through other ones on my short list. I'll let Gregory do that part because I don't want to steal thunder. But yeah, so I'm going USA for Africa, We Are the World for my pick in 1985.
Got you. That's an interesting one. I kind of forgot that came out that year.
Well, I was hoping to not have to get into this in the first episode, but like We Are the World, along with another of handful of MJ songs that came out after this point, immediately crossed off my list. I know it's impossible to rule out all problematic artists, as we'll see, but like that one for me is really hard. I will not take MJ away from other people, but for me, I can't put those songs even in my short list because of what happens later, even though growing up, I loved MJ just like everyone else. But I know at the same time, I have a bunch of friends where MJ is such a significant cultural aspect to their lives.
Hmm.
So I would never fully take MJ out, but you will not see anything by him in any of my shortlists as we go through. So that's not me discrediting the music. That's me not feeling comfortable rewarding the man, even on this silly YouTube channel with, I don't know how many followers you're up to, Dan, but I know you're averaging a few views.
Joe, you're evil. No, I'm kidding.
No, I mean,
I respect that, Greg.
That's a fair take, of course, and I think I actually wouldn't have personally picked an MJ song, right? But it's not just him; it's also Lionel Richie for writing credits, and there were 50 artists featured in it between the musical instruments, the composer, the conductor, the actual solos, the choristers. So you're talking like the impact goes so far beyond just the one person in that. Like you're talking a reach of just pretty much every significant artist at that time was involved in this song in some way.
Oh yeah.
So that's the only reason, because I actually feel the same way about MJ mostly, but this song, because of its reach and its impact beyond just him, still to me beat out the others of the year. So
I can respect both of those angles too, though.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Also, it's easy to say I'm not going to pick an MJ song when we're past 82, since that was the MJ album. I mean, the future stuff is good, but I mean, no Billie Jean, no Thriller, so I can take that stance when I don't have to pretend I'm leaving those off my short list. But 85, my short list, Head Over Heels for Tears for Fears. If I Ruled the World, Curtis Blow. Party All the Time, Eddie Murphy, which is not a good song, but amazing anyway.
It's an amazing song.
Raspberry Beret, Prince. Rock the Bells, LL Cool J, which makes my short list, even though the remix he did for his Greatest Hits album a few years or decades after this.
Yeah.
The Rock the Bells remix, I think, is better, but I mean, Bells was in that way was not a thing hip hop was doing at the time. And so that was huge. And then Super Bowl Shuffle, once again, not a good song, but huge cultural significance. And I mean, the Super Bowl in 85 wasn't the Super Bowl it is now, but that makes the fact that they did this even bigger. But, and unfortunately, I do not have a copy of this on vinyl. I can pull up this artist in a later year, but for me, it's I Can't Live Without My Radio, LL Cool J. It's my favorite LL song. It was his first big hit. LL was Def Jam's first artist. His connections to early hip hop. I mean, guy was a crossover star before he was a crossover, like before that was a thing.
Yep.
I know Will Smith is a bigger crossover star, but LL did do it first. I mean, Toys is one of the best rapper turns actor performances. And if you like reads about him, his manager at the time was not giving him messages from Hollywood. So LL could be a completely different person. It's culturally significant in a way that's even larger if he had better management, but that kind of speaks to, unfortunately, what happens to a lot of hip hop stars and that they just run in with the wrong people who aren't actually looking out for them. So I Can't Live Without My Radio, LL Cool J, first televised hip hop Grammy. I know Will Smith was the first hip hop Grammy, but LL was the first one on television. And LL has a lot of hits later, but this one's the one that clear cut takes the year for me. I did an art project where I drew the cover of that record as a significant meaning to me. So yeah, Rock the Bells, hands down for me for that. Or I Can't Live Without My Radio, hands down for that year for me.
Love it. So 85 is close for me. At first, I thought I'd have to go with How Will I Know, my Whitney ballad. Then, If I Ruled the World, Curtis Blow, I was like, how do I not? And then it struck me that LL Cool J's Can't Live Without My Radio was released in 85, not 86 like I thought it was. It became a hit in 86. So I too had to go with that song because not only am I impressed by his journey and what he contributed to hip hop, but that is one of my favorite hip hop songs of all time. It's really one of the songs that got me into hip hop to begin with. And the first sunny day of every year, that's the first song I put on. And then I listen to it every day throughout the rest of the sunny days. So much along the lines of what you said, I'm right there with you. Actually, after picking that song, I think I listened to that song 6 times the night that I made my list. It's on every playlist. It's the the cover of that album is actually hanging in my office at work. So I'm right there with you for that being my favorite song of that year as well.
So I think I know which one's going to take this year.
When Dan posted this video on his Facebook wall, I knew which one was taking this year. But honestly, the reason I don't have this on vinyl is there's a lot of LL Cool J vinyl out there, especially from the late 80s, early 90s. And I have friends who, if they see an LL Cool J single, will send me like a 12-inch single, which is always the most ridiculous thing. But because I love vinyl, but putting a single on the record player to flip it over after one track is ridiculous. So they're more of a collector's thing. But I can never find this one. I can find anything else that was released in vinyl, I can usually find in a used shop. But this record is just not one that's out there. And for good reason, his first one and the significance. I mean, if you think about hip hop up to that point, the Curtis Blow is a good example. Rapping was a different thing before you got to LL Cool J and Run DMC and the Beastie Boys. It really was a rough spoken word poetry. And these guys made it something different. And early LL still has a lot of that feel to it, but he helped define what was the East Coast sound. Like you can hear
it was smooth storytelling.
Yeah, you can hear Jay-Z and Biggie in LL Cool J. And I know I think there's a little bit of Kendrick in LL. I think Kendrick's a West Coast rapper, but even though he's worked with Dre, Kendrick has like an East Coast flow to him, I've always felt. And that can all be traced back to LL Cool J becoming a mainstream hit.
I think, the artists of that time also fed off each other in a lot of ways. And so his influence, even some of the Rum DMC stuff, he was touring with them at one point, his influence on other artists was also there. So he may not get the credit or whatever, but once I got a tiny giggle and a side smile when I was like, ooh, that song's from 85, not 86. So I had a feeling we were gonna have the same one, because anytime I post that video when I'm in that, like, just vibing with that song, I always get one like on that, and it's always you. So I was like, oh, me and Greg might match up on this.
Yeah, it was interesting going back, especially 84, and how significant MTV and VH1 were growing up, because a song like Sunglasses at Night by Corey Hart, which is a great pop hit, but it is forgettable if you don't have shows like VH1's I Love the 80s. And even like Billy Joel's got like a whole career that's great, but like Uptown Girl falls in that same thing too, and could be lost in a Billy Joel category. I know my favorite version is the Chipmunks version anyway, but it's unfortunate. I know people belay the fact that MTV has become just Rob Dyrdek, which good for that man. I like that man. He does a lot for his friends and community. So give him all the paper, as the kids say.
He just bought a hotel one time because he wanted to buy a hotel.
Yeah. Who doesn't just do that?
Yeah. I mean, if you have the money to buy a hotel, you buy a hotel and you have a couple floors for your friends. Like, that's what you do if you've got that kind of money. And one of the problems, of course, is people hoarding money. So a man like that who gets that money and spends it so freely, that's wonderful in so many aspects. But it's unfortunate we don't have that cultural touchstone that is an MTV or a VH1 anymore. And I know part of that is streaming, but just going back I mean, I wasn't born until late 85. Joe wasn't born until almost out of the 80s completely. So we wouldn't be able to have a discussion if we didn't have those things. We all like music, so we would know these songs. We would know Summer of '69. We would obviously know Prince. We would know Tina Turner. But would we know Relax and Frankie and Power of Love? Because honestly, I never heard those until I Love the 80s. And then I was like, man, this was a whole movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe that 1 year difference in age, like from when I was born, has anything. Because for some reason, those songs are all just like, long for that I just knew. But I also had a mom who was heavily into music, so like music was always everywhere, and it was always that music. And I, from an early age, had like cassette tapes and all that stuff, and was recording off the radio. So,
and I do think that's part of quite a bit of it is your parents as well. But that was not the music our parents were listening to, right? So outside like a lot of Rush we listened to growing up because my mother's a big Rush fan.
A lot of Scorpions, which is probably
Oh, yeah.
why a hair metal band snuck into mind.
A
And our
lot
mother
of
did love Prince growing up. So
yep. That's one of the reasons When Doves Cry is so ingrained in my brain is I can remember listening to it in the car, like in my mother's car, right? That one, and some of the little bit later stuff, Tom Petty, but kind of maybe more of his later 80s, 90s stuff. That stuff is ingrained in my brain as well. So I do think it does have a lot to do with who your parents are and what they're listening to, because on the flip side, my father only listened to like strictly what is now considered classic rock. He wasn't turning on many radio stations that were playing pop hits from the 80s. It was strictly classic rock, Led Zeppelin, The Doors, The Who, that kind of, like, it was not anything else. So
see, I was raised on like the Sex Pistols, Violent Femmes, the Ramones, the Clash. Like that's what my mom listened to, and so then MTV for me was like, oh, there's other music out there that doesn't make, it's not just hurting my ears. But so I think it's nice to see like all the different things. But yeah, Greg's right in his take on MTV. I mean, it made a lot of things relevant, and a lot of avenues were explored for a lot of people. But I always love just hearing where like inspiration for what we listen to comes from, or maybe we reject what our parents listen to and we listen to something else, or all that sort of stuff.
well, and it's interesting you mentioned Violent Femmes because they're a band that I greatly associate with soundtracks, because Blister in the Sun is a great soundtrack song. And I think I always enjoyed that song, but I didn't really go back and listen to the Violent Femmes until this Anna Kendrick's film where she's in a debate team with a kid, and there's another kid whose parents make him play Blister in the Sun on a violin. And it was such a great rendition with no lyrics that I'm like, man, the Violent Femmes slap. And that's actually, the Violent Femmes are what are currently on the record player right now. So you said movie soundtracks earlier, and that is a huge thing in preserving music. And that's another thing where, yes, there are movies that everyone sees, but then there's so many movies no one sees. So that's and the soundtracks don't chart anymore.
Yeah,
Black Panther soundtrack, I think, being the last real great exception to that.
Yeah, that was Kendrick put together an amazing album with that. I think that may be a cool thing for us to explore once we get through all the decades, is going through soundtracks, because I have hundreds that I would love to go through. So I think that might be a good place to go.
Moana, the greatest soundtrack of all time.
Moana slaps, to be honest.
Moana's great. I mean, even on Moana, it's got a Regina Spektor's cover of While My Guitar Gently Weeps on the soundtrack. And
yeah, I can mess with Moana. We're doing 2 years at a time here, so I think it's going to be interesting to see where we end up in 86. That's when music really started to change, and I think that's where kind of our favorite genres might start to come out as well. Just looking at the songs that come out from those decades, and I'm really interested and curious to see where we end up with that next week. I think 86 and 87 are going to be fun, and we're not going to see nearly as much parody for the rest of the decade between us.
Maybe. I'm not sure that's true.
No?
Well, I don't know. It depends on what direction everyone goes, but I could easily see my 86 pick coming up with in somebody else's list too.
I definitely could see mine. I think my short list is going to hit all of you two for 86. 85, I'm not too surprised that two of us matched, and Joe's curveball outside the ball one. I think otherwise I would have pictured him going with LL as well.
I specifically would not have picked that song knowing you were going to pick it. As soon as I went through the list and I was like, yep, that album came out in 85. I knew that, and I even knew which song off that album was going to be the pick. So I specifically would not have picked that. And that's probably going to be moving forward. If I think one of you two is going to pick it, not that I know your music as much, Dan, but if I think one of you two is going to pick it, I'm going to specifically pick something else, just because it's not as good of content. If we all sit up here and be like, yep, this is the one and best song of that year.
I think this is going to be interesting too, knowing that you guys know each other's music so well. So I'm really looking forward to the next ones. And this is a good starter to what's to come. And this Battle of the Ballads is going to get very interesting. We have a long way to go for just starting, but damn, I'm excited. So, gentlemen, it was great. Any last
It
words?
was awesome.
Only last words I have is hi Zoe, and also,
Hi,
and
Zoe.
also Joe for 86. Even if you're 100% sure on picking the song you're going to pick, go with it, because if we do end up with the same one, I love the story about this song. So,
Okay, then based on what you just said, I'm not sure we have the same one, so that's good.
okay, good. Even better.
Greg gets sentimental, and Joe's like, fuck that. I love it, gentlemen.
Drunk Joe would pick this song, though. So,
Oh, yeah, no, I left it off specifically for that reason.
okay.
Jesus. Oh, this is going to be fun, gentlemen. I look forward to next week, and
Absolutely.
this is going to be an epic journey. So thank you for joining me.
Gents.
Thanks, Dan.
Yes, much love.